All right, welcome to episode 17 of Tougie's Take. Tougie's Take, brought to you by the Coalition to Arrest God here on 420, reminding you that the Earth is one big grow house. Shut down the operation. Keep our solar system clean. Tougie, how are you doing?
Oh, God. I am fantastic. And that's an episode start.
This is the intro now. This is the intro now. This is the intro now. That sounds good.
Oh, God. So, yeah, everybody, welcome back to another episode of this lovely, lovely podcast we have going on here. Again, we are very much in the midst of Deej and I each fighting our own personal battles. Deej against numerous insurance companies, hence the blown out voice, and myself against the battle of wallpaper from 1970. Which is also going to be causing irreparable damage to my vocal cords and lungs over the years. So we don't know how much longer this podcast will go on given the circumstances. But hey, we're going to try to hang in there for you this week. And much like last week, we'll see about the second episode and the bonus show throughout this trying time for both of us. Deej, take us in whatever direction you care to take us. If you want to rant and rave about stuff you've already ranted and raved to me about, feel free, or you could just bring us into our lovely viewer questions. But I figured I'd give, I don't know if you wanted to treat the vocal cord issues as, this is just something we'll ignore and people will question, what's going on with Deej? Is he okay? What's up? Or if we wanted to allude towards it.
I'm just gonna power through the vocal cord issues as my voice slowly morphs into one of a man who has worn suspenders for years.
Speaking of which, hold on, my God, because the house my girlfriend and I bought, dude. So the house is in pretty good shape. But there's general things to do, right? Like you update the house. We bought a house from an older couple. I hate to say it, but the man passed away a couple of years ago, and now the wife's selling the house. And I don't know, but I can only presume she's going to Boca for her retirement. Who knows? That said, with this house,
she is.
With this house,
somebody who used to live in Boca, she is.
It's very much, they didn't change a damn thing since at least the mid-70s in terms of the carpeting, the wallpaper. And yes, they were the type of people to paint over wallpaper in certain sections of the house. But literally, it has been prying up wallpaper with a putty knife. And then you get to the adhesive layer that was behind the wallpaper, which, my God, it is literally multiple times having to wet down the surface so you can even pry it off, because it is just, you could find, this is probably more dry than things that they find in pyramids in Egypt. I don't know how it's possible. It's a nightmare and a half. But my favorite,
your walls.
Basically, yes. Like, it's incredible. My favorite part, though, is when we tore up a lot of the old carpeting. You could literally see, because it had like foam padding underneath the carpeting, you could literally see where they had furniture placed and where their paths were constantly going. You could see their walking patterns in the carpeting and in the padding because it was unchanged for so long. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just need to vent. Oh, God, we're both having times. do you want to get us on track for the show? I could go all day with this ranting and raving.
Let's start with some viewer questions. Do some viewer questions here while I can still speak.
Yeah.
So this first one comes from Endo Mills. What'd you have for breakfast?
Nothing yet. For those who don't know, we are recording the show much earlier in the day because of my now busy schedule. And I took the dog for a walk, got our list of topics together, and here we are. So while breakfast is the most important meal of the day, I have absolutely dropped the ball, and I apologize to all of those who staunchly defend the importance of breakfast. I've let you all down.
Yeah. You know, I don't even know that breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Have I been lied to?
Perpetrated by Big Breakfast. Big Breakfast, just perpetrating lies. So I don't know. I had my usual breakfast of
A monster.
Energy drink and a handful of pills.
Yeah.
Just energy drink and a handful of pills.
Oh, God, no, that's the most important meal of the day.
100%.
So, yeah, you know. This is going to be one of our best shows yet. I can't wait. Are you sure, sponsors that we're talking to, that you want to jump on board this? Are you sure? Oh, God.
Use code PILLS for 20% off your handful of breakfast pills.
Oh, good Lord.
All right.
Whew.
This next question comes from Nipsey GG via Twitter. What do you think is the reasoning behind the Flyers being one of the hottest teams at the start of the season and then all of a sudden being the fucking worst team in the league?
So we've talked
Probably
about this,
drugs.
right? Probably drugs. Not enough monster and pills. We call that the Chris Farley diet back in the day. R.I.P. Mr. Farley. I mean, we've talked about it a lot this season, though, right? When it comes to the Flyers and just the idea of it's got to be coaching. It has to be coaching because it's tough to want to just say that this core is suddenly broken, especially when no members of the core left. And I don't think you can chalk it up to just, well, Carter Hart's in a slump. You know, a season-long slump at this stage. To me, it screams coaching and the system's not working. If I'm not mistaken as well, at the start of the season, they had delayed games due to COVID, and then they had a very condensed schedule that seemingly kicked the hell out of the team and really threw them off any rhythm they sort of had. So, I mean, there are a lot of different things. It's pretty obvious at this stage, though, you know, if the Flyers were going to make a change, they would have done it by now, and they haven't. So, you know, it's one of those crazy things where, again, we talked about a ton this season here, Deej, where I thought the Flyers were cup contenders. And, I mean, right now they are 9 points back of the Bruins, and the Bruins have 2 games at hand. The Flyers are out of the playoffs. Like, I have full confidence in saying that on April 20th, we have less than a month to go in this season. The Philadelphia Flyers are out of the playoffs. And that's astonishing to me that that's the case, because in no way should this have been how this season played out. You know, I mentioned this too, and I know Rangers fans, at least some of them, are dying for this to pan out well for the Rangers, because I said there was no way the Rangers are going to make it. And right now, the biggest threat, really the only threat to the Bruins not making the playoffs, is the New York Rangers. It's still a 4-point lead with 2 games at hand for the Bruins. There is a legitimate chance that, yeah, very well, the Rangers could catch the Bruins. I mean, if the Bruins were to slump. I mean, they've been very hot lately. But, yeah, I mean, it's simply incredible to see. You know, we talked about the possibility of the haves and the have-nots in each division, just with the way the structure played out. Never would have thought the Flyers were the have-nots. But I think, you know, the condensed schedule due to COVID cancellations, you're also looking at, I think, a big-time coaching issue. Just everything went wrong for Philadelphia this year, and it's shocking. I still don't know what to make of it, really, given the circumstances.
So I was talking with one of my friends about this over the weekend, and he actually had a pretty interesting take on this. As my friend AJ asks questions on the show sometimes, but he he had mentioned that maybe this isn't a coaching issue. And I thought that was an interesting take. So I thought about it. We talked about it for a little bit. And he brought up a very interesting point. And that is between Voracek, Van Riemsdyk, Giroux. Really, if you look at this D-core, it is Ivan Provorov and 5 guys that are bottom 3 defensemen. Basically, it's really interesting. So to extrapolate his point a little bit and add a little bit of my own twist on it, essentially play styles determine how long you can play in the league for. Like if you are a grindy, gritty player, obviously you're going to have a shorter career and you're going to like fall off a cliff a little bit harder than if you are more of like a finesse player. And so the Flyers have been kind of a grindy team for a long time. And at the same time, they have relied on the same stars for almost 10 years now. So there's also this idea that maybe Giroux, Voracek, and Van Riemsdyk aren't necessarily cooked, but they are no longer the stars that can carry your team that they were, say, 5-6 years ago. And I think that's really interesting. Might not necessarily be what's going on, but it's certainly something I've been thinking about as a possibility for why they've just suddenly fallen off a cliff.
Now, to the point of the star players, I'll agree with that. I think there is, well, I still think someone like Claude Giroux is a very valuable player. There is that conversation, I think, legitimately, that he might not be the guy to build around. That maybe he's more of a Johnny Gaudreau at this stage.
That's a good comparison.
The Calgary was hoping that Johnny Gaudreau's the guy. Sean Monahan's the guy. But as it turns out, they might need to be those very talented supporting players to get it done. You could argue Philly still has someone like Couturier, who in theory could be the guy. Defensively, I will say, I do think it's Ivan Provorov, Travis Sanheim, and guys. I think, I look at someone like Travis Sanheim as a very solid defender. But at the end of the day, too,
that's fair.
There is some legitimate criticism there because you look at their cap-friendly depth chart, which was last modified on Sunday. It says Sunday night. It has Provorov and Braun. Is Justin Braun who you want on your top pairing right now? Probably not. Like, I do agree. Like, I think he has a place on that team. And just because I'm intrigued more than anything from an analytical standpoint. He's a good defensive defenseman still, but he's also 34 years old. That's not the guy you want on a top pair. Robert Haig is with Travis Sanheim, and Haig has played a little bit over half of their games this season. Still someone you don't want your top 4. And then your third pairing is Sam Morin and Shane Gostisbehere. And, Sam Morin's been a great story this year. Absolutely. I thought this is a guy who, unfortunately, due to injuries, is never going to play an NHL game, and that really sucks. That's really unfortunate. And he has literally fought his ass off to get game time this year, so I commend him for that, certainly. But he's alongside Shane Gostisbehere, who, again, was on waivers not all that long ago before the deadline. So that's a fair point as well. Maybe that that team defensively just isn't where they need to be as well. That said, I think you can look at other teams. I think in general, sure, the Islanders' core is probably more well-rounded, but how much better is, say, the New York Islanders' defensive core versus the Flyers? I feel like it could at least be considered close. I'd give the edge to the Islanders.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then that's where coaching comes in, right? Because actually,
that's the coaching. Yeah,
right. Like, we'll take a look at it. The Islanders' depth chart right now for defense, again, last modified Sunday night. Pelech and Pulock, who are both great, I'd say, or at least Ryan Pulock is. Letty Mayfield, Coburn,
anybody
and
who
Andy
watches
Green.
Your franchise videos knows Pulock.
Right. Coburn and Andy Green, who are 36
guy.
and 38 years old. So, you look at that defense core, and they've also had like Noah Dobson play 36 games. And young player who's 21 years old. But, you look at Dobson. You look at that Islanders core, and it's like, okay, how much better are they than Philadelphia on paper? I'd say they're better, but are they that much better? So it's definitely, I guess, an amalgamation of a lot of different factors that's just led to one of the worst seasons in Flyers history. And it leads me to bring up this stat. I was going to save it for later, but we can bring it up now because for Philly, the only talking point this year has been how bad it is and the fact that Wade Allison scored his first NHL goal, which is cool. But Deej, I saw this post on Reddit, and
that
it was
a NASCAR name.
It really is, isn't it? Wade Allison, son of Davey. Worst save percentages, worst team save percentages since 95, 96. So you're looking at the last 25 years or so worth of information. Deej, do you care to guess? Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 teams here for worst team save percentage since 95, 96, which is almost as old. That's I've been alive for a little bit longer than that, which is crazy. Care to guess where Philly is at the time that this stat was posted in terms of the worst 8 of all time?
Okay, so all right, so this is just from 95, 96 till today, a combination of save percentages.
So team save percentage.
Okay, for basically the last 25 years, an average save percentage. Just to it's still early. The caffeine, the pills and caffeine.
Yes,
it's all still.
So, for example,
kicked in yet.
They're not the worst. The worst team in terms of save percentage in a season was the 95-96 Sharks. Their goaltenders' save percentage was an 869 on the season.
Nice.
An 869. Very nice on 420. That is the worst of all time. Care to guess where this modern Philadelphia roster is in terms of save percentage?
Are they bottom 10?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're talking about the bottom 8. So how bad are they? In terms of the bottom 8 is the question.
The bottom 8. Okay, so this is, all right, let me clarify one more time. So this is individual seasons amalgamated over the last 25 years.
I'll just give it to you.
This is like, you're turning me into John Chayka here with these advanced stats.
Okay, so again,
like
the worst of all time.
Burgers.
The worst of all time was the San Jose goaltending unit as a whole, not just one goalie, but every goalie that played. The combined save percentage for the Sharks in 95-96 as a team was at 869. Philadelphia is tied right now for the second worst team save percentage in the past 25 years at an 876, which is tied with the Tampa Bay Lightning roster of 99-2000. I mean, this is the worst team-based save percentage since the 2000 season, because you have Tampa that year in 99-2000. You also have Atlanta in 99-2000, and then the other numbers are from the 90s, the mid to late 90s. So this is, an historically bad season that nobody could have predicted when you look at the fact that you have, someone as highly touted and rightfully so as Carter Hart. So I guess for Flyers fans, we can stop twisting the knife now. But yeah, to say the least, this has been one of the worst seasons in team history.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I just real quickly brought up that 95-96 Sharks team to see who was in net. And they had Arturs Urbe on this team. I figured. Which is like, he's the only household name for me. And he didn't play a lot of games. I believe he only played 20 games. Had a 4.59.
Jesus.
They had Wade Flaherty. He played a few games. Jeff Sargent played a few games, and they both had above 4 GAAs. And then their workhorse was Chris Teriri.
Legendary Marty Brodeur backup.
43 games he played, a 3.7. Holy cow. A lot of the guys on this team went on to be they had Viktor Kozlov, Igor Larionov. This is not a bad roster. Sandis Ozolinch. Wow, they had a bunch of guys that went on to be Florida Panthers on this roster. They had Ray Shepard. What?
It says a lot, doesn't it?
Did the Panthers and Sharks have like a Blackhawks Panthers thing going on back then? But oh my God, that's nuts. This was just like and what's interesting is like a lot of these guys, like obviously Wade Flaherty and Jeff Sargent aren't exactly like household names for me as like I'd say somebody that watched hockey very casually in the 90s and like the 90s and late 80s are kind of like a big hazy period for me because I wasn't watching the sport and there's not enough like nostalgia and documentaries about that yet. So that's fascinating to me that's that bad. And I almost want to look up, what'd you say, the 99-2000 Tampa roster real quick, just to see what we can compare this Flyers roster to.
I mean, because I'm trying to think of who the hell the goalie would have been for the Lightning at that stage, because obviously you're pre-Hobby Boolin.
Yeah.
Was it John Graham? Like, that's my guess for who their goalie would have been that year. And it's only because of the Bruins connection.
So I actually knew who their goalie was. I wouldn't have been able to name him in 100 years, but I was collecting hockey cards at this point. So I knew that Dan Cloutier went 930-3 with a 3.44. They started 6 goalies this year, just trying to find somebody that could make a stop.
But they had just drafted the Michael Jordan of hockey, Vinny LeCavalier. So,
yeah,
look out.
Gosh,
I love Vinny LeCavalier, but boy, was that a huge disservice to him to have him hyped up that way. For those who don't remember, that was legit, by the way.
Didn't they? Didn't they give him the C as like a 19-year-old at some point?
I think they did go, as I call it, full Landeskog, and just immediately gave him the captaincy.
Full Landeskog. Episode title found immediately. It's interesting. They have 3 guys listed as the captain on this roster.
Let me guess. LeCavalier. Tim the Toolman Taylor.
No, unfortunately,
really?
He was not an NHL player.
Oh, God. No, but, Tim Taylor was the captain of the team, but I think that was it was like 05-06 after the lockout, and then they gave it back to LeCavalier or something like that.
That's fair. So let's see, these other 2 guys, one of them I'm aware of. The other one, I have not seen this guy's name before.
I got nothing. I have no other
so
guesses.
Chris Gratton is listed.
Chris Gratton wore the C?
Yeah, apparently. And then so did Bill Holder, who I'm not very familiar with Bill Holder.
If you haven't looked up legendary mustache, Bill Holder.
Oh, really?
If you haven't looked up Bill Holder, you absolutely need to do it. Houlder, Bill Holder, legendary mustache, the pride of Thunder Bay. Shout out to our friends of the show, Baker and Timo. The pride of Thunder Bay, Bill Holder. Wow. Great mustache. And great mullet, too, when he was on the Ducks.
When he's young and he has his mustache shaved, he looks like exactly like my dad did at that age. That's real weird. Bill Holder, he apparently at some point played for a team in the Thunder Bay Junior Hockey League called the Thunder Bay Beavers, which is just a great team name.
You got to get that alliteration in there. All right, well, Nipsey.
The TBJHL's TBBs.
Well, hold on. Screw it. We're already here. Let's see. Does the TBJHL have any great team names? We're already here. I need to look up the TBJHL just to see if there are any other great names from that particular league. And I don't know if there will be. I need to look this up, though. The Thunder Bay Junior A Hockey League.
There would have to be, right?
And, God, there are some old teams here.
The Thunder Bay Flyers have a great logo.
They haven't been a thing since the 80s, apparently, this particular league. So that's unfortunate. But what a history, featuring good old Bill Holder. They also had... unfortunately, there weren't any great names. This goes nowhere. This segment dies outside of
Nor'westers.
Outside of the
Thunder Wolves? You're going to tell me the Thunder Wolves aren't a great team name?
I didn't even see them. Well, Nipsey.
I don't know. I just I brought up the the list of champions, and the Thunderwolves are on here apparently.
Ah, there you go. Nipsey, I hope this segment went the way you wanted it to when you brought up the Flyers.
I hope this was. I hope you got your answer.
Oh, delightful. Relabbit asked this on Discord, and I actually don't know if Deej has an opinion on this, but he said, thoughts on the Super League, the European Super League that was announced, and they might not be going through with it. Who the hell knows, but they probably will be. This looks like it's happening. So for those who do not know, some of the biggest teams in Europe, this has been rumored for years, are going to branch out and start their own league, which has massive ramifications, not only for, say, if you're talking the Liverpools, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, the Man Cities of the English Premier League. Not only does it have massive ramifications on that league itself, it has massive ramifications for the UEFA Champions League and the Europa League, but it also could have a massive effect on players' eligibility for the World Cup. This is a gigantic story that literally is shaking the foundation of what football, what soccer happens to be on essentially a global scale for what this could mean. And you know, you talk about it from the team's perspective, and what does it come down to? Yeah, it comes down to money. And, you know, I could get into the entire conversation and spend a long time kind of talking about, I mean, every aspect of this. But again, for me, I'm waiting to see how this all plays out, because you already have unnamed teams kind of backpedaling where they're like, well, I mean, we felt pressured into doing this because the other kids were doing it. Like literally it's well, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? It's the same crap with teams trying to save face because of the negative backlash that's out there from fans. And there are fans that essentially view this as, if this goes through, it's the death of the sport. It's the death of the team that they grew up supporting, because it essentially flies in the face of everything that, you know, the idea of the sport. It goes against the concept of the sport and how it was created, with the idea of it being the working man's game, and you know, how important fans are to these clubs. It literally spits in the face of that entire concept. So there's still a lot to play out with this. So it's tough to have a full opinion at this stage. But my initial thought is overwhelmingly negative. And I mean, you know, Liverpool played Leeds this weekend, you know, the day after this announcement was made, late in the evening, by the way, for locals over in the UK. And of course, it's not just, you know, English clubs as well. I mean, you have Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Real Madrid. From Italy, you have AC and Inter Milan, Juventus as well. Like, we're talking huge clubs. The only, the holdouts right now are from France, which is shocking, with Paris Saint-Germain holding out and not getting involved in this, which, you know, you look at the ownership of that club and compare it to some of the English clubs, and you're like, okay, what's your angle on this? And German clubs as well haven't really gotten involved, but the structure of team ownership in Germany is much different. And I'll encourage people, your research assignment, if you care, is the 50+1 rule when it comes to ownership of teams in Germany, which is, you know, the idea that, you know, essentially the owner, I don't know if the term oligarchy would make sense. I don't think it does. The term's escaping me right now, but essentially that it's not just.
It might. That's actually fair based on what I know about the situation. Yeah.
That essentially in Germany, it's set up in a way that control is never, and here comes they're coming to get me. I'm speaking too much about the Super League.
How do people get injured in Maine? Was that an ambulance?
A moose must have stepped into the road. That happened 2 weeks ago. Anyway, Yeah, it's just it's a really screwed up situation. There's still a lot of ways this could play out, but this whole concept was rumored for years at this stage of the idea of the biggest clubs just up and leaving and starting their own league. And I mean, you think about the concept of that in hockey. Think about what that would do to the NHL. Like, say, it's not a fair comparison, but from the NHL, you have the Leafs, you have the Bruins, you have the Rangers, you have the Blackhawks, and the other big teams leaving behind, and no disrespect, but your Arizonas, your Floridas, your Carolinas, your other teams that might have, wins in, under the belt, but don't have that long-standing tradition going back hundreds of years, or not hundreds, but 100 years or a little bit less. And they up and leave and start their own new league. What that does to the NHL, what that does to the smaller teams, especially when so much of the money for teams that work their way up to the Premier League is intertwined with, man, if we make it to the Premier League, we get, this great financial payout, and there's so much incentive to keep clubs afloat. And then you get into the concept of they're doing this when COVID's a thing. And you have had teams, much like numerous other businesses, that are just holding on for dear life to stay afloat. And you go through with this move that is viewed as nothing else other than just a pure money grab. Like I said, there's a lot to it. It's just an incredibly screwed up situation.
So I actually do have an opinion on this. I doubt you're listening to this because you're from England, but there's a very talented bass player that I used to play music with by the name of Michael Martin. And on Facebook this week, he went on a rant, and I was like, what is going on? I need to read this. And he was like, I can't believe that my Hotspurs have joined this league. And basically, he made a lot of the same points you did, where football, soccer, I like soccer. Soccer, of course, obviously being short for association football. It's just slang for the same word. Don't want to have this conversation. It's already in the comments. So basically, soccer is the sport of the people. It is the most accessible sport. That is why you see highly successful people from third world countries, because all you need is a balloon or some other easily found latex object. You fill it with trash, you got a ball, you make a goal. Good to go. Soccer is the most accessible sport in the world. So it's interesting to me, right, that the European Super League is happening. I know they're having issues with there's teams that are against it, but still want to compete in this, what may be the final go through of the Champions League. I guess it's really interesting to me, but what I want to address, though, and I wasn't sure what point I wanted to make here until you said something. When you talk about the best teams of the NHL, if they were to just pack their bags and say, hey, we're forming a new league. So let's rewind a little, because I want to take you back to the 1970s, because we saw this happen with something called the World Hockey Association. Mm-hmm. Where they packed their bags, and the best teams went, they joined the NHL, and the teams that couldn't keep up, they didn't survive. Their players got redistributed amongst the NHL, minus the Canadian teams, which were basically allowed to stay themselves without losing any players. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. Teams like the Cincinnati Stingers, completely gone, The Houston Aeros, obviously not the same team through the AHL. Their legacy kind of survived, but I think this is very similar to it's very dissimilar to the NFL, AFC, AFL merger, where almost all those teams stayed intact and were fine. And it was basically just a marriage of the two leagues. This is kind of, we're going to see a lot of teams disappear. That said, as somebody that is not a big Premier League fan and doesn't really have a team amongst any of the non-MLS organizations, I feel like for Americans, this will end up making soccer easier to get into. Despite all of the terrible repercussions this is going to have down the line across all the different leagues. I'm sure I can name 3 of them. There's the Bundesliga, there's the Premier League, there's the Rerun League. that after the Premier League? I don't know. No, but this is really interesting to me because to me, it's very similar to the WHA merger, although on an international scale. We've never really seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean the WHA. I mean it's a little bit different in that obviously, there's a tier system, especially for the English league, where the FA essentially you have your 4 different tiers, and then there's non-league football even below that with the National League. So it is a little bit different in that way in terms of the structure, but that is fair. I mean, we have seen it on the U.S. side of things. When it comes to, like you said, with the WHA, where, if you look up the WHA, you had, of course, the Edmonton Oilers come over. You had the New England Whalers become the Hartford Whalers. The Quebec Nordiques and the Winnipeg Jets came over as well. Every other team folded. Every other one. Now, obviously, it's not the same thing where, like a Burnley or a West Ham, they're not going to fold. But the effects that it could have in terms of the league, I mean, you are talking about if these big clubs leave, there is less money. And then what happens? Well, players who are like, I want to get my foot in the door with one of these teams and then move on to a bigger team. Well, that bigger team's not in the same league anymore. So you essentially just become a feeder system. And then what happens from there? So there's a lot. And like I said, too, I mean, people, for the most part, know, like, I'm a Liverpool fan. I have been for over a decade now. It's one of those things where, and I mentioned this, too, like my grandmother on my mom's side, her family is from the Liverpool area. And I remember growing up and seeing a Liverpool scarf in my grandmother's living room and not knowing what it was because, when I'm growing up, is that stuff accessible on U.S. television? No. And it's so weird to say now, though, because for those who don't know, it's Fenway Sports Group that owns Liverpool. Same, obviously, people that own the Red Sox and, John W. Henry and everything. And it's so weird to say now, but it's them I have to thank for me finally understanding and getting into the sport. And it wasn't easy at the start because, man, when Liverpool games first became accessible on TV for me, they sucked. And all I have to mention is the likes of Fabio Barini and Ricky Lambert, and people who know, and people who don't, that's okay. Just know, kind of get what I'm saying here, where I'm like, hey, here are these names. You can kind of understand that I'm mentioning people who probably shouldn't have been playing for who is now viewed as one of the biggest clubs in the world. And it just sucks now that ownership group is viewed as, and I'm going to say rightfully so, one of the worst things, despite the fact that ownership group stepped in at a time where new ownership was desperately needed. They're now viewed as the villain here. So it just puts me into a weird spot as a fan where it's like, how the hell? I mean, I think it puts every, Liverpool fan into a weird spot where it's like, what the hell are you going to think about? Hey, here's this ownership group that did so much and their actions now, it's just a spit in the face, really. So it's just, it's one of those things where, not to say you question the entirety of your fandom, I guess, but also it's like, well, kind of. It's an incredibly screwed up situation. We'll see how it plays out. I have no idea how it's going to play out at this stage because there is so much negative attention. The only thing I can really bring up at this stage is, I mean, it came out today too that you have, one of the grandson of one of Liverpool's, biggest legends in Bill Shankly, who has a statue outside the stadium. He is requesting that Liverpool take down the statue of his grandfather, which is on a bigger level than if, like, the grandson of Bobby Orr is like, yeah, take down Bobby Orr's statue outside of TD Garden. I mean, I think that kind of says it all in terms of the reaction to this. So we'll move on.
Well, I mean, if you look at, obviously...
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I did have one small point to add.
No, go ahead.
So, like, obviously a little anecdotal, but if you look at what happened with the WHA, I mean, they had 17 teams. 4 of them were allowed into the NHL. And of those 4 teams, the New England Whalers became the Hartford. They moved to Carolina. Quebec Nordiques became the Avalanche. Winnipeg Jets became the Coyotes. Like all these teams had to move other than the Oilers. Like, so these WHA teams, like, I don't know, in losing that league identity, it seems like the NHL was put in a situation where they ended up having to relocate these franchises.
That's the thing. At first, I thought you were just repeating the same information I put out there, but that's a fair point that you added on. It's not just that, oh, these are the teams that survived. How many of them then had to move afterwards? You're right.
All of them but Edmonton.
Yeah. It's... again, different set of circumstances because of structures and things like that, and how, you know, I think it's a fair point how clubs are viewed versus franchises, and that's a big difference between American sports and the European scene. It's one of the biggest, I guess, pieces of sporting news to come out, I think, in our lifetimes, depending on how this plays out.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt, especially with, it's how big, soccer is.
Yeah.
Like something like this is insane. An international league's crazy.
Yeah. So with that, we'll mention our final Twitter question here. This is without a doubt the longest viewer question segment we've ever had, but I'm on board. Why the hell not, man? This has been fun. The last question was from Bob Capson, 24 on Twitter. When the Penguins are healthy, are they legit contenders? If so, is this their best shot for that core to win Cup number 4? And again, similar to the other Philadelphia-based sports question, I've talked about this. The Penguins have a chance at winning a Stanley Cup this year. They do. I get what happened to them, last year and everything. But at the end of the day, I'm never going to bet against a Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin-led team if they are fully healthy going into the playoffs. And we've talked about this a lot in terms of where teams are in terms of a cup window. When is it best to take a step back? For the Penguins right now, they are very much in the mix. If the season were to end today, yes, they'd have to play the Islanders, and that's an incredibly tough task, as they know. But yeah, you talk about the playoffs in general, and we've talked about our cup favorites, but out of that East Division, any of the 4 that are currently in it, and again, not to disrespect Rangers fans, but any of the 4 that are currently in it between the Caps, Islanders, Pens, and Bruins, I could see making it out of that division because those are 4 incredibly strong teams. And I think Pittsburgh's proven throughout this year where we're like, oh, they're going to make it. They might not even make the playoffs. And they're going to make it at this stage. And yeah, I could easily say, Sidney Crosby too has just been on such a heater as of late. Like I said, I cannot bet against Sidney Crosby in this type of situation. I just won't do it.
Yeah. I think, and it's interesting, the second part of this question is like, do you think this is the best shot for that core to win their 4th cup? And, obviously Malkin's been playing through some injuries, but you could argue that Malkin isn't the Malkin we're used to this year. And then when you look at other guys on this roster, like how much longer can Crosby continue to play at this level? Chris Letang is, people have been betting it's the year he's cooked every year for the last 6 seasons now. Mm-hmm. You got to wonder, though, how long is this window going to be open for them? And with the Penguins playing so well right now, while it seems like the window is about to close, this might be their last shot at a 4th cup.
That's the thing, right? Oftentimes with a team like this, you don't know the window's shut until it's emphatically stated that the window is shut.
Fair, very
Chicago, heading into 2016, I still think people thought, and maybe this is with hindsight, but I recall 2016, there was still some sense that Chicago could be a dangerous team. Now, if I'm not mistaken, around that time was when they started to get into a little bit of cap trouble. I think around that time was like, oh, we got to get rid of Brian Bickle because of his health issues, and we'll send Teuvo Teravainen to Carolina. You had certain moves like that, and I'm actually trying to look up the list here. And yeah, that summer after that cup win, they had to send Ranta to the Rangers. They sent Brandon Saad to Columbus for Artemi Panarin. They had to move on from Patrick Sharp. They moved on from Christopher Stieg and Joachim Nordstrom. So that was certainly one of those moments where you're like, okay, they're probably taking a step back, but they also bought that year as well towards the deadline. Like they brought in Andrew Ladd, Christian Ehrhoff, Dale Weiss and Thomas Fleischmann in the Philip Deneau trade. So there was still certainly a sense that this team is probably not completely cooked, and they were the top team in the Central Division from the looks of it, unless I'm off the mark here. Or no, excuse me, they were a playoff team. They were behind Dallas and St. Louis that season in the Central, but they were still a 100-point team. So you have a team coming off of their third cup. Yes, they've had roster changes, but they're still a 100-point team. Maybe they have a shot. And then what happened in the playoffs? They lost to St. Louis. They lost to St. Louis in 7. Okay, maybe you're good. They come back the next year, 2016-17, Central Division champs. What happens? Smacked, swept by Nashville, done. That window is shut. So when you think the window might be closed, you think, oh, well, maybe still. Oftentimes it's emphatic. You know when that window is closed. For Pittsburgh,
it's a good point.
We'll find out. Right now, I won't say their window is closed, but about time they were to go into a series with, say, the Islanders or the Caps and just get smacked around again. I think we can say that at that stage they might have to reconsider, I guess, what their target is moving forward.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I get that's a really good point. Like when you're a GM, your window's always open until you're like, oh shit, it's not. That's I don't know. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, you got to believe in your core until it becomes impossible to.
Yeah, and I mean, oftentimes, like I said, it just becomes very apparent, right? And I mean, I think back to the Bruins, essentially. Obviously, and again, we're coming up on it. We're like 2 months away from the 10-year anniversary of them winning the Cup. But what happens in 2011, 2012? They make the playoffs again. They do quite well, winning their division. And then what happens? What happens in the playoffs? They get smacked by some young kid named Braden Holtby. All right, cool. 2012-13. What happens? Second in their division. They make it back in a lockout shortened season to the Cup final. They fall short in 6. The next year, though, 2013-14, the Bruins were the President's Trophy winners. And it was looking good until they lost to Montreal. And that was kind of when because the next 2 years? Or was it 3 years? I think it was the next 3 years they missed out on the playoffs, or I think 2, if I'm not mistaken. Those were some low times.
It was only the 2 years.
And then even once they came back, they lost to Ottawa when Erik Karlsson just went off. So, like I said, it's often emphatic when you know the Cup window's closed. So, we'll see with Pittsburgh. My opinion, it's certainly very much open at this stage.
Yeah. So, let's shall we move into some general hockey talk? I know we have a pretty big piece of news this week that, to me, didn't seem to have the gravity that it should have.
I agree.
I mean, obviously, everyone was all over it, but I don't think the true significance of this moment of Patrick Marleau becoming the most. In my opinion, the way to phrase this is he is now the most prolific NHL player of all time. He has had more of an effect on NHL ice than anybody else. I believe the stat was it's something. 37% of all NHL players of all time have shared the ice with Patrick Marleau at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is huge. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're wrong, and I'm not sure if it's just because of the lack of fans and attendance for a moment like this. I'm genuinely not sure kind of what led to this. For Sharks fans, I'm sure it definitely feels as big of a moment as it should. But I think you're onto something there when you're talking about the perspective of the rest of us around the league, where it kind of just felt like just another milestone, whereas it shouldn't feel like just another milestone. I'm not saying it should necessarily have had the I guess I'll go with the gravitas of the idea of Ovechkin catching Gretzky in terms of goal scoring. But Gordie Howe's record of 1,767 games played stood as the record for 59 years. 59 years, which is longer than, that record's ever stood in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball. This record was set on November 26th of 1961. And that's when Gordie Howe played his 1,000th game. I think he passed Ted Lindsay, who was at 999. You're right. Like, this should be, I guess I'd say, a marquee moment in a way. Like, this should be so monumental, and it is. But still, you're right. It feels like it just wasn't as big of a moment as it necessarily should have been. And I get that maybe, road game factor during COVID, but it is simply incredible to accomplish what Patrick Marleau has. And I mean, this stat popped up on Reddit. Martin St. Louis made his NHL debut, played 1,134 games, retired, had his number retired in Tampa Bay, waited out the waiting period, and was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. All in the time that Patrick Marleau made his debut and up to today. Like, Marty St. Louis had an entire career in the time that Patrick Marleau continued, on with his own. It's absolutely insane. And I can only hope that, eventually it starts to have that feeling, aside from, I'd say, Sharks fans, maybe, Leafs and Pens fans, and shout out to the Hurricanes for a great tweet calling him a team legend. But in general, Patrick Marleau, I mean, the word legend comes to mind. Like, he broke a record set by Gordie Howe. Like, it almost doesn't even register as something that was even possible at that stage. Like, that should have been an untouchable record because, again, Gordie Howe played into his 50s. Like, it shouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, he was on a line with his kids.
Right. Like, it's something. How is that possible that Gordie Howe had a record broken? Like, in terms of goals and by points, like, Wayne Gretzky beating it isn't shocking, but that's because it's Wayne frickin' Gretzky. Like, and maybe it's just because, at the end of the day, like, Patrick Marleau isn't going to be, breaking. I mean, I don't even know. Let's see. NHL all-time point leader. Like, I don't know where. I don't even know where Patrick Marleau is on this record. But most people know that Ovi's closing in on, catching Gretzky. Like, that's the one we all seem to be focused on at this stage. And I guess maybe a problem with it is Patrick Marleau is 50th right now, all time in scoring. 4 more points. He ties Dino Ciccarelli for 49th. So maybe it's just because, he's not super, like, he's up there. Obviously, he's 50th all time in league scoring, which is incredible. But maybe it's because he's not pushing for that record. Maybe it's because he doesn't have a cup to his name. I don't know what it is, but you're right in that it doesn't feel as monumental as it should, even though, of course, for my money, Patrick Marleau is top 3 minimum, if not number 1, if he retires without a cup, which it looks like he might, unless he plays next year and something crazy happens. He's certainly a Hockey Hall of Famer. He was before breaking this record. It's just, you're right. Something just felt like it was missing last night.
Yeah. And for me, I've got to wonder if you add fans and the Sharks aren't bad this season, I feel like that doubles the gravity around this. Because really, I mean, the highlight, other than like a few tributes and like a congratulations here and there, was they made him those super cool custom gloves. Did you see the gloves?
Yeah, and the patch, too, that they had on the jersey last night. Yeah,
that was super cool. So I don't know. You got to wonder if the Sharks are good this year. Does this moment suddenly have significantly more gravity? And I feel like it would.
I think, you take away COVID, you have it be a home game. It would have felt. This is a moment, I think, now that was robbed by COVID ultimately. And there have been a lot of those moments, right? I mean, you talk about whether it be the LA Dodgers finally getting back and winning a World Series, whether you talk about Tampa winning, so many of these moments in sport. I mean, shit, even the Lakers winning, the year Kobe Bryant passes away. All of these moments, when you talk about sports in general, and so much of it is the emotion and the atmosphere. So many moments have been robbed by the lack of that atmosphere. I mean, Willie O'Ree was going to have his number retired by the Bruins, and they postponed it a year because they didn't just want it to be a meh kind of moment, right? Where it's like, okay, we want fans to hopefully be in attendance if we postpone this for a year. And I pray to God, and I hate to say it, but it's something that I think everyone is thinking. But Willie O'Ree is 85, going to be 86 in October. You just hope the man makes it, because you don't know at that age. And my God, what a shame it would be. And I hate to even put the thought out there that this man doesn't get his moment in the sun like he absolutely deserves. And then it brings you to the thought of Patrick Marleau and what this moment would have been. It's just a shame, really, at the end of it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, all in all,
obviously historic, very cool to witness it. I think in retrospect, this moment will be seen with the proper gravity. It just isn't right now.
Agreed, definitely. We'll move on then to just a quick little talking point before getting into actually the AHL a little bit. But Deej and I talked about this a lot. And again, if you missed our deadline coverage, feel free, of course, to check out the podcast. Of course, we had the day of live stream put up on YouTube as well. And of course, we had our last podcast, which was a full breakdown of everything trade deadline related, or at least 2 podcasts ago now. Everything trade deadline related in terms of giving a team a win or a loss, or somewhere in between. But one of the things that we talked about a lot and really piqued my interest was the idea of, does the NHL do something about the 3-team trades that happened? Do some GMs, put up a fuss in regards to these, someone like Toronto taking on, a double retained Nick Foligno to make that work salary wise? Does that get taken out? Is that removed as an option? And this was from Chris Johnston of Sportsnet, saying that the NHL is to closely monitor teams taking advantage of LTIR. And, you look at that. A team like Toronto, how are they built? LTIR, they're built with that cap retention. Again, Foligno does not happen unless Freddie Anderson's on LTIR. And there have been a lot of Leafs fans to say, well, how hurt is Freddie Anderson at this point? He's been sitting for a while and he's finally back in practice, apparently. I think there could be some very interesting rule changes on the horizon when it comes to LTIR and when it comes to the multiple salary retentions at this stage. Not saying myself or for Deej that we think it's something that should be removed or that we think it's cheating or skirting the system somehow. I'm personally fine with it. Again, we did nothing but praise Kyle Dubas for the moves that were made there. Tampa as well, taking advantage of that. It's just incredibly shrewd business on their part. But I could see the ability to do what these teams have done in relation to LTIR and the retention being taken away by GMs that honestly are, I hate to use the word, but are just a little bit salty that they got outplayed.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, if a rule is broken, you need to exploit it. You can't just be like, well, it should be a rule, so I'm not going to do it. That's just not how competitive sports works.
Right.
And so I would like to see something that makes the salary cap more straightforward. I think that's the issue here, right? Is between the long-term injured reserve and the ability to do these double retained salary trades, the salary cap is no longer straightforward. It suddenly becomes a very, like, you have to know about it, right? Like, you need to understand these ins and outs, and it's no longer the thing that as a salary cap, it's advertised to fans and your average hockey watcher as this very basic thing. And suddenly it becomes this thing where you need to know all these odds and ends, and then it gets like you've almost got to be like an agent to understand some of this stuff and how teams are able to get under it. And I think that is the type of thing the NHL wants to avoid.
Yeah, and I mean, then you can get into the whole discussion too of, well, even if they were to move to like the NBA, style luxury tax and everything, but even then, there would be different ways that teams would do things, and like you said, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the NHL in general just kind of wanted to simplify things just a tad bit, all things considered. So, Deej, unless you have anything else to add, shall we talk about the AHL? Something we haven't really been able to do too much on the podcast as of late.
Yeah, got a little bit of a shuffle going on.
Yeah, so as someone who's been affected by this, I wanted to quickly bring this up as well. But as I think we all know, the AHL has not been limited to movement. You, as a Florida Panthers fan, are well aware of this because of the numerous changes that the Panthers have had with their affiliation. But as of today, the New Jersey Devils have apparently informed the Binghamton Senators, or the former Binghamton Senators, now the Binghamton Devils, which again just goes to show how many changes there have been. But apparently, Binghamton will be losing another team. The Devils are going to relocate their club to who knows where, although the rumor seems to be Utica, which are currently occupied by the Utica Comets, who are affiliated, of course, with the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks looking to do exactly what the majority of other Western AHL teams have done, and that is move west to be closer to their parent club, which, again, that was the big shuffle that saw, me in the state of Maine lose the Portland Pirates, which really sucked, and I'm still not over, really. And, it's one of those things, too, where you can't argue against it. It makes sense. Everyone's talked about the absurdity of, Vancouver, BC, Utica, New York. Like, it's just the travel does not make sense, which, again, is why the Sharks. What happens? You move the Worcester Sharks in Massachusetts and you move them out to San Jose, just outright. Like, it makes sense. It absolutely sucks for some of the cities involved. But at the end of the day, too, and I'll say, I've had that experience with Binghamton where they were absolutely traveling fans when it came to the AHL fan base. I certainly saw my fair share of Binghamton jerseys, whether or not it had been the Sens at the time. So it's just one of those things that kind of sucks, but I think you're going to continue to see this as well. And I won't be surprised as we continue to get, hopefully, towards the end of this COVID climate, where the aftermath of, do we see a few more shakeups in the AHL and the ECHL just because of the financial effect that this past year or so has had on these clubs?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, the Charlotte Checkers haven't even played a game this season. The Panthers had to, obviously, the Panthers are splitting Syracuse with Tampa. I think that we're going to see a lot. Yeah, it's like you said, we're going to see a lot more AHL movement. Like, things still need to settle. Like, this league just essentially went a year without 50% of their teams playing a game. So, I mean, for a hockey league like the AHL, it's not like they have deep coffers to keep themselves afloat.
Yeah. So, again, we'll see how that plays out as well. And the other quick thing that we wanted to mention here, because I know it was going to be brought up, even though I've talked to people about my opinion on the draft, and we've mentioned it on this show. It is a complete crapshoot at this stage. We have no idea how it's going to play out. But Bob McKenzie with TSN did release his top 100 for the midseason draft rankings as well. The unanimous number one, according to, I believe it was 10 out of 10 NHL scouts surveyed by TSN, as it was stated, do name Owen Power as the number one, which isn't surprising, Deej. If I tell you there's a 6'5.5", 213-pound defenseman projected to go number one, I'm pretty sure you're not surprised.
Yeah, without a doubt. That, I mean, like, if you're a scout,
does that not
just
check
point at the guy?
Right. Does
That's
that not
all
check every box for what every NHL team still wants?
Yeah, they want huge dudes. It's like, just keep them going. Yeah, and I think even, 6'5.5", 213 at 18 is insane.
Right. So
that is some genetics.
Talk about winning the lottery, right? I mean, aside from that, though, as we all know, it is a complete toss-up, right? Like, even TSN has Dylan Genther as a forward and Simon Edvinsson as a defender tied at 2. Like, it literally, that's just to say, well, it depends on who gets this particular pick and what direction they want to go. Like, even for the second and third pick, like TSN and the midway point are already saying, yeah, it's a complete toss-up. And we already know this. But that said, what caught my eye, aside from Deej's favorite name of the draft and mine as well, Chaz Lucius, was the fact that we have another goalie in the top 10, which isn't surprising, and Jesper Wallstedt, who has been incredibly hyped, and rightfully so. The other thing that caught my eye at this stage was the fact that Sebastian Cossa, or Cossa perhaps, of the Edmonton Oil Kings, is also projected in the top 14. And Deej, I can't help but think there's a reason as to why. The man is 6'6", and
yeah,
you can't teach size, as they say. And I just can't help but think that's people being like, well, see if we could teach him from there. If he has the size, who cares? Especially as goalie equipment continues to shrink.
Yeah, and you got to think, like, the amount of sizable goalies that are not first round prospects that this guy has got some skill to back it up.
Yeah.
I think, what is he ranked 13 or 14 on the
14.
draft board, I believe?
With apparently a 942 save percentage.
Gosh.
In 11 games with a 145 GAA. So limited sample size because of the lack of games played in the W. But yeah, highly touted to say the least.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and if you look at pictures of Cossa playing, he plays real low, which I find fascinating. And with that size, when you're able to play that low, you just take up so much of the net.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. So it's very interesting to me that we have two such highly ranked goalies when first round goalies are very much a crapshoot.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on as we get closer to the draft. But again, complete crapshoot this year. Although, of course, it is interesting because for the first time, 32 teams are listed. That said, the best part, of course, some names that caught our attention. Shout out to Mackie Samoskevich of Chicago in the USHL. Great name. For sure. Deej, I know you had a couple of others. I don't know if you can stumble upon them. I know you shouted out Cole Hawkins, which for those that have paid attention to anything franchise mode related on my channel, you'll definitely remember the name, one Cole Hawkins. I do love, though, back-to-back, both of Fargo in the USHL, Tristan Bros, it might be Bras, I hope it's Bros, and Jack Pert. There are some great names in this draft.
Yeah, especially, I mean, shout out to Samuel Helenius. And this is my favorite. I can't believe I missed this on my first pass through, but Riley Kidney. Like the organ.
Like the organ. As well, Jack Barr, also out of the USHL with Chicago. Shout out to the USHL. Great names. Of course, a toss-up in Cameron Why Not, which it's just still absolutely phenomenal. Colton Dach is in this draft too. Luke Hughes. I mean, there's also, familiar names. It's going to be interesting, and we'll end things, of course, with the one and the only Olin Zellweger. No relation to Renee, I presume.
Yeah, right. Maybe. No, it's not spelled right. That's fine.
It's a damn shame. So, Deej, with that, shall we get to our little bit of a division breakdown to kind of end this particular show?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I think we should continue our tradition of standings order, and we'll just start with the West.
Works for me. So at the top still, Vegas, no surprise, Colorado right on them. The only thing to mention here for Vegas really in the past couple of days hasn't necessarily been a week, but I do want to shout out one Max Pacioretty, who hit 300 career goals over the past couple of days here. And, I think I don't necessarily want to say unsung. I know it's weird because obviously Bruins fan and the history of Pacioretty with the Habs obviously, but I got to say I'm happy for Pacioretty at this stage. And I mean, he's now on 302 goals, 599 points. Just a really goddamn good NHL player in his tenure. And it's not surprised to see him hit 20 goals. I mean, for the most part, he's been, a slam dunk to hit at least 20 goals for almost a decade now. So, and of course, a couple 30-goal seasons in there as well. So, congrats to one Max Pacioretty, but not really too much else to talk about with Vegas. Deej, your favorite Max Pacioretty moment What?
Oh, that didn't involve him getting hurt?
Yeah, that didn't involve a criminal investigation.
I got to think about that.
Fair enough.
I might not have one. Like some vague clutch overtime winners have come to mind, but I don't know if I have a favorite Max Pacioretty moment. I do. There is one thing I want to say with Vegas. Again, they very quietly have a 7-game win streak going.
I would say that's quiet because everyone expects Vegas to have a 7-game win streak at all times, which is an incredible. And it really it's kind of incredible to think about that still, of course, as we're on the verge of, another team about ready to join the league. The fact that Vegas is already at the stage where you're just like, yeah, they probably have a 7-game win streak right now. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
So aside from Vegas, with Colorado then, not too much to talk about really. In the past week, they've won 4 in a row. Minnesota as well, nothing to talk about. They've won 4 in a row. But then we get to, again, that very interesting situation with Arizona, St. Louis, and San Jose. Now, in terms of that playoff, scenario and how that could all play out, not much new to talk about. Not much to talk about with St. Louis or San Jose. But Arizona, Deej, is one of the interesting teams right now. Unless you have anything to add about any of the other teams I just kind of discarded to the side. Shall we talk about the very interesting development with the Coyotes? All right, well, we'll get into it then. Aside from the fact that Chychrun, and this was posted by Dmitry Filipovich, that Chychrun at one point in the past week had scored 11% of the total goals the Coyotes scored as a team, which is why I refuse to bet on them making the playoffs, because they have no depth scoring if they're having to rely on a defenseman to that extent. The big news in the past week has been that sports betting, and this was really undersold on Reddit, I was surprised, but sports betting has been legalized in the state of Arizona. Now, previously, there was a permit structure that essentially limited it to only the native tribes in Arizona. But at this stage, it has been, completely opened up in certain ways, essentially. And you look at it now, owners of professional sports franchises within the state are also able to obtain licenses, which makes it interesting because you look at the owner of the team in Alex Marleau, and he owns the Grand Sierra Resort in Las Vegas. And the passage of this bill, essentially made him the first Vegas casino owner to be able to gain a foothold in Arizona. So essentially as well, he could only have this license as long as he owns the Coyotes. So in terms of the future for the Coyotes, for maybe the first time in their history, it is set in stone. The Arizona Coyotes are going nowhere. Why? Because they were likely only purchased and are still likely only being used for the sole purpose of Alex Marleau being able to have casinos in the state of Arizona. It is a millionaire, if not billionaire, doing exactly what they do. So to one Deke Slayer, who we've had on this show before, and to all Coyotes fans, I mean, it really does have the feeling of you're being used, but at this stage, that team is going nowhere as long as Alex Marleau is the owner of it and, has the intention of what I'm sure will be an extremely profitable gambling setup in the state of Arizona.
Yeah, there's no way this leads to anything shady, right?
I mean, you could already call it pretty shady at this stage. I think that's a fair enough critique already, is to call this very, very shady. And like I said, this is a post on Reddit that had like 150 upvotes. And I mean, like I said, for the Coyotes, might it feel a little bit dirty? Might it feel like you're being used? Sure. But the alternative is that how much longer could the NHL possibly justify keeping your team in that state for the sole purpose of saying, well, maybe it'll catch on and then the market will really work? And again, it was talked about, you could have moved to Houston, a bigger city, and still capitalized on the same market in the same region that they were attempting to gain. So it is tremendous news, all things considered, for Coyotes fans.
Yeah, I agree. That sense of permanence has got to be incredibly comforting.
Yeah, and I mean, what it could mean, too, for the future of a new arena, if they wanted to, because now, not only are you saying, well, I'm building an entertainment complex, I'm building this entertainment complex that has a casino. And immediately, you cannot tell me the city of Phoenix or wherever the hell you want to build this stadium isn't that much more interested because of the gambling money that comes associated with it. And then you talk about the taxation on that gambling money. And I think a lot of people who were saying, hey, there's no way we're going to pay for the stadium, I think some local residents break down and say, sure, we'll help fund the stadium, even though this guy in no way needs help funding this. I think at the end of the day, this is exactly what leads to the Coyotes getting a brand new stadium in a more ideal setup. At the end of the day, too, that, ultimately sees a casino tied directly to it. It's a major win for the Coyotes' future, even if it is, even if it has that feeling of being a little bit shady.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I, for one, I'm looking forward to the Poker Dome. Or whatever they end up calling it. The 7 Cherry 7 Stadium.
Will the name be better than the Talking Stick Resort and Casino, or the Talking Stick Resort Arena, where the Suns currently play and where the Coyotes used to play? Time will tell. But at the end of the day, actually, I think it's not even called the Talking Stick anymore. I think now it's just Phoenix Suns Arena, which is very boring and very bland. So aside from that, nothing to talk about the LA Kings aside from potentially down and out on making the playoffs at this stage. But with the Anaheim Ducks, there was an interesting note here. I mean, aside from the fact that their goaltenders are typically getting shelled. I saw the stat that John Gibson stopped like 40 some odd shots and still lost because they were playing Vegas. But there was the goalie stat as well that Anthony Stolarz broke the Ducks franchise record for saves in a shutout with 46, just to show how bad that defense is. Ben Scrivens-like performance from Anthony Stolarz. The previous record, it was tied at 45 saves for Jonas Hiller on December 20th of 2010 in a game against Boston, and Dominic Roussel, December 22nd of 98 against Colorado. So shout out to Anthony Stolarz for having a record that I'm sure no goalie necessarily wants to have, the thought of having to make that many saves to bail out your team.
Yeah. I mean, this year, if you're on the Ducks, it's like we said pretty early on in this podcast. If you are, if you're the Ducks goaltender, you're going into this every single night knowing if they get 2 past you, that you're probably going to lose the game.
Right.
So I'm surprised this didn't happen sooner.
Yeah, I mean, especially again, it's been a pretty brutal season for them, all things considered. And just another quick thing as well, it's just crazy to me, the passage of time and how it works. But April 13th of 2014, we have passed the 7-year anniversary of Teemu Selanne playing his last regular season game, which is absolutely crazy to think about. I still miss that man. My God, what a player. And crazy to think that it's been that long. And that really goes to show when I'm trying to find some way to talk about Anaheim, and it's like, hey, remember when your franchise best player retired 7 years ago? That's how your season's going. So that's gotta be a little bit upsetting.
Yeah. That you'd think they would have built on it. That's unfortunate.
As well, I guess we'll move over to the Central Division, which I'm very excited to talk about. Carolina right now atop that division. Same amount of points as the Florida Panthers, but with 2 games at hand. But Deej, then we get to talking about the Florida Panthers. My friend, to set the stage for you, Sam Bennett, 3 points in 2 games. He got in a fight against Gavin Bayreuther. He assisted on Brandon Montour's first goal. Sam Bennett looks more motivated than I think any player I've seen in a very, very long time. Feel free to commence the gushing about Sam Bennett.
So even if Sam Bennett had 0 points in these games, if he was not on the score sheet at all, he has made such a difference on this team. I have not seen the Panthers have a player like this in some time. Sam Bennett, there are not a lot of players like Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett is an incredibly fast skater. Sam Bennett can play center. He can play wing. He is a grinder that is also a sniper that can also skate fast. Like, that is not a common set of skills. Like, you see Sam Bennett make a huge hit, burn somebody skating, win a puck battle, and then set somebody up to score. And so we actually have him on the second line right now, playing center with Jonathan Huberdeau and Anthony Duclair. And that second line is gross. It's just the second they're on the ice, it is chance after chance after chance. Like, if Sam Bennett can't get the puck, Jonathan Huberdeau can. If the puck is on Duclair's stick, Duclair is one of the fastest skaters in the NHL. He can burn people, get into the corner, set something up. He loses a puck battle. Sam Bennett's right there to fight for it. And then you got Jonathan Huberdeau, who everybody has seen the highlights. He's an absolute wizard with his passing ability. Sam Bennett, did not realize this, was the exact player that this team needed. Last night, he actually had a goal and a fight. And he received a game misconduct, a 10-minute misconduct for the fight. So he was actually out of this game for 17 minutes when all was said and done. And he still came back and made a huge difference. I absolutely love this trade only 2 games into it. Sam Bennett is, every time he's on the ice, I'm just excited to watch him. I don't know why, but it's really interesting to see somebody in Florida wear the number 9 after Stephen Weiss wore it so long. I mean, Brian Boyle wore it briefly for 2 years, but it's very interesting to see another impact player like Stephen Weiss was for the Florida Panthers wear it, and it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, the ability for a Montour to step in, an ability for Nikita Gusev, and I do want you to talk about those other 2, but essentially, what could these guys do with their new clubs? And I mean, Sam Bennett has made as good of an impact as just about anybody this side of Taylor Hall, perhaps. But in terms of, that instant gratification of we, as a fan base saw our teams make the right move. Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I knew you were going to be very, very happy given the circumstances here. Like I said, Montour got his first goal, and I haven't heard much about Nikita Gusev. Just your thoughts on those 2 so far.
Nikita Gusev's first point as a Panther was an assist on an Alexander Barkov goal. And this assist absolutely blew my mind. Not in terms of it being fancy. It was the little things about this assist. And I didn't even think, as somebody who's played beer league hockey for years and played in high school, I didn't even think about this as a possibility. But Gusev, in this assist on the power play, goes to pass the puck. And he puts his weight on his stick and pulls it back as if he's going to pass it across over to Huberdeau, who's waiting to take a slap shot. And instead, once in this position, just feathers the puck 3 feet in front of him to Barkov. He fakes that he's going for a long pass, and while holding the motion, just throws one of the most delicate passes I've ever seen right to Barkov. And that kind of stuff you can't teach. It's so cool. Gusev's really good. Obviously, his skating is an issue, but he's always in the right position. He's got great skate work. And I expect him to have a couple goals pretty soon as he figures out how to get in the right areas. And based on what I've read about the Panthers is they basically let Barkov hand select his line mates, where he's like, I want to play with those guys. Our top line right now is Mason Marchment, Alexander Barkov, Nikita Gusev. So obviously Barkov sees something here. I've seen some cool stuff. I haven't exactly seen him turn into the scoring threat that he's advertised as, but that said, it's only been 3 games that he's been on team. Brandon Montour is great. Brandon Montour is the type of defenseman we haven't had in a while, where he is he's a genuine rover, which is interesting because the Panthers haven't really had that in a while, or at least we haven't had a rover that's like a good enough skater to be able to cover his own mistakes. Like you could argue Yandel isn't a rover because he's a pure offensive defenseman. He's a specialist at this point. So it's really interesting to have a guy like Montour with that offensive edge, but also the skating ability and hockey IQ to quickly recover whenever he overplays.
So, it's one of those things where we continue to get the question every week, hey, Deej, do you think the Panthers are legit? And, I don't add it to the viewer questions because, I mean, this isn't just Deej hyping up his favorite team. Like, the Florida Panthers are 100% legit. And it's interesting now, too, the final point here that I have about Florida at this stage, and it's certainly an interesting one. We've talked about the goalie situation all year, where Sergei Bobrovsky is still trying to overcome an incredibly slow start, which isn't surprising that Bobrovsky had an incredibly slow start. But it's at the stage now where, of course, you view Chris Driedger as, man, he was essentially our own rental because we decided to hold on to him. But now, if I'm not mistaken, Deej, in that game you mentioned, Spencer Knight was the backup in that game. And Coach Quenneville has said this, according to Elliot Friedman, that there's a good chance Spencer Knight makes his NHL debut against Columbus, what would be tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you view this as a Panthers fan? How excited are you when you've seen even teams like Boston have someone like Jeremy Swayman step in, who, trust me, I'm going to have my own chance to gush about a player, and he's going to be one of them. How excited are you, and how do you view this again for the future of the team? Because, again, it's almost as if you kind of know Driedger's out the door. Is this Spencer Knight's chance to prove, hey, I am going to be good enough to be the backup next year. Have faith in me. Don't worry if Driedger, has to be, set to the wayside because of the cap circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chris Driedger is making $800K a year, and he is, like we said last week, amongst goalies that have played a minimum of 1,000 minutes, he's the second best in save percentage behind Vasilevsky. There's no way a team that's paying Bobrovsky $10 million can afford to keep him.
Yeah,
so the
2 to 3 minimum,
obviously
right?
Very accurate.
$2 to $3 million minimum is what I think.
I would be shocked if he makes less than 4. But Spencer Knight, obviously the reason we signed him, we brought him up to this taxi squad, was to get him some play time. And Spencer Knight currently, as of last night, he was sitting on the bench wearing his USA hockey pads with his Boston College helmet, because I guess it's all approximately Panthers colors, which is pretty great. I am so excited to watch Spencer Knight play tonight. I really hope he plays tonight. However, and I do need to point this out, because if there is a brand, Tougie, that me and you have as hockey fans and the weird things we discuss, it is really bizarre stuff that is just delightful. So last night, they had Spencer Knight wear a special warm-up mask to be auctioned off. And I will send you a picture of this, but it is a Spencer Knight mask. So it is a Florida Panthers mask, but on the sides, there is a painting of Spencer Knight wearing a surgical COVID mask. So it is a Spencer Knight wearing a mask, goalie mask, that is being auctioned off. So we have Mask Inception, brought to you by Baptist Health, apparently.
Sure. Let's just go with sure. Aside from that, then, in terms of talk with the Panthers, unless you have anything else, looking at this division, there's not too much to mention, I would say. Shockingly, no real talking points for Tampa or Nashville, who are still in those playoff spots. For Dallas, I mean, I have to shout him out because it's become a trend on this particular podcast, but Jason Robertson, up to 32 points in 38 games at the time that I saw the stat, took the lead for NHL rookie in points per game this season. I don't think he'll win the Calder, but again, it cannot be understated just how good Jason Robertson's been for the Dallas Stars and what his emergence can mean for that team moving forward if they miss the playoffs this year to hopefully get right back on track towards being a playoff team and being back in contention for next season.
Yeah, I mean, I know you say you don't think he'll win the Calder, but he is only 4 points behind Kaprizov. So I think
I just
we
think
could
the hype
see
level.
an upset. That's certainly a possibility. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Kaprizov single-handedly revitalized the franchise. I mean, obviously Robertson didn't do that.
I think the big part there, like you said, revitalize the franchise. The Minnesota Wild are going to the playoffs. And I think Kaprizov is going to be, viewed as, and possibly so. I mean, who's to say this is incorrect, but he is being viewed as the reason that he, Dallas not making the playoffs, take Jason Robertson off that team. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. You take Kaprizov off of that team, it almost gets into the Hart conversation where the hell are the Minnesota Wild without Kaprizov? I think it's hands down.
Very true.
Unless somebody beats Kaprizov by like 10 points, I think he gets the Calder at this stage.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
So aside from that, then, the only other talking point, again, to Chicago, Detroit, we got nothing. But Columbus, because Habs fans have brought this up a lot as well recently. Max Domi is having a time. He was scratched by John Tortorella. Quote, Tortorella would not go into detail regarding Domi being a healthy scratch. He was furious when Domi lost his cool 2 minutes in a 10-minute misconduct versus the Blackhawks and Connor Murphy 3 games ago. Benched him after he did the same exact thing against Rhett Gardner. So Max Domi, in case you didn't know, is a very frustrated individual right now. And, I'm sure there's a ton of different reasons, whether it be frustration with the coach, frustration with the situation, frustration with his own level of play. And yeah, I get it. There are a lot of Habs fans who are, tap dancing right now in celebration over the fact that it's been a rough stretch for Domi, and Josh Anderson, in the short term at least, has been a very good pickup for the Habs. That said, we'll see. We'll still see how it plays out. I have no issue saying that, yeah, right now for the Habs, it's looking good. But you also don't judge a trade off of the first 6 months of it. I don't think that's a fair way to go. And I think, you might not care, but I think that's you setting yourself up for some counter strikes down the road. For example, I'm very happy with Taylor Hall, and we'll get into that. Am I going to sit here and laugh directly in the faces of Sabres fans? No, because as unlikely as it may be, who knows how the Sabres will benefit from that particular draft pick that they have. I'm just saying, sometimes you might not want to go a little bit overboard, a little bit too early on in the aftermath of a trade being made. But yeah, sure. At the end of round 2 of this 12-round fight of the Domi Anderson trade, yeah, the Habs are ahead right now. And hey, for their sake, you better hope that Josh Anderson's health stays where it is. Of course, he's missed some time this season, but when it comes to the Blue Jackets, Deej, just another bad situation that keeps getting worse, basically.
Yeah. At this point, obviously Tortorella's contract is up at the end of this year. I hate to be one to question Kekalainen's decisions, but it's very bizarre to me for him to trade for Max Domi, who is an emotional player, and put him on a roster coached by a coach that very famously punishes emotional players. That is a very bizarre decision. Obviously hindsight 2020, like when this trade happened, I probably wouldn't have had that take, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's very interesting.
Well, between that and Patrick Laine, and we've talked about that, right? Like the players that you're bringing onto this team that just do not fit what that coach looks for at all. I mean, you could say that he's, that Kekalainen's been backed into a corner, with Josh Anderson as an asset and with Dubois, and just tried to do the best he could in those, in those situations where he was kind of forced into those set of circumstances. That's a fair defense, but also in a way, if you're going to hold on to that coach for the sake of, knowing that his deal's up at the end of the year, you set yourself up essentially for what the rest of this season has been.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Blue Jackets are tied with the Red Wings in the standings.
Yeah, they are. And their goal differential is only one better than Detroit. Detroit's technically ahead of them on tiebreaker. Columbus right now, at the time of recording, is at the bottom of the Central Division. I get, obviously, too, it's not surprising they traded away certain people, but it is, I mean, we talked about the Blue Jackets as like, man, are they going to be one of those teams that, the Central Division stacked? You talk about nightmare seasons for the like of Philadelphia. This has been a nightmare season for the Columbus Blue Jackets. One of the worst in their franchise's history, dare I say, because of the expectation and the caliber of that roster.
Yeah. It's just, that's a mess. Yeah. We'll figure it out, hopefully.
So we'll move on then to the Mass Mutual East Division, of course, still headed up by the Washington Capitals. I will say this because this conversation continues to persist, and I obviously understand why. But Zdeno Chara, I think he is roughed up right now, but has had some impressive moments with the Caps, including one particular penalty kill. Look, would I still love Chara to be in Boston? Yeah. I mean, again, as much as at the time I'm like, well, at least the Tom Brady departure prepared me for this. It does suck. And not just because the Bruins' depth, on defense has been tested at certain points this season, but just all in all, yeah, the reality that Zdeno Chara is not a Boston Bruin still absolutely sucks because, you talk about the other moves that have been made with this team. I think at this stage, if you had Chara in on that defense right now, I mean, I get the idea of playing the younger guys, but I can see it from Chara's perspective of not wanting to be a depth defenseman. But I also, of course, saw it from the Bruins' perspective of, well, look, on the left side, we have, Zaboral, Grzelcyk, Lozon, and now obviously, too, they've gone on to pick up Mike Riley and Jared Tenorti off of waivers. Like, it really sucks the way that it played out. And I really do wish he was still a Bruin. But I can't say that I'm, not happy for him at this stage. As well with the Caps, Anthony Mantha, this number might have changed, but the last thing I saw was 4 goals in 4 games as a member of the Capitals. So again, as much as people were absolutely dunking on the Caps and saying that Yzerman fleeced them, and look, Yzerman did very well. Anthony Mantha has been a phenomenal pickup, to say the least, for the Washington Capitals at this stage. And yeah, you want to talk about a scary team. They are a scary, scary team heading into the playoffs. And as well, they re-signed Connor Sherry to a 2-year, $3 million extension. He's got 11 goals this season. The only unsigned players heading into next year for forwards are Ovechkin and Michael Raffl. So we'll still wait to see what happens with Alex Ovechkin. But Deej, your thoughts on Washington and what I just mentioned?
I mean, obviously the Connor Sherry signing, I like that a lot. Sherry is the type of player that can help you on cup runs. I mean, obviously he's got that pedigree coming from Pittsburgh, but Mantha is looking like a really good deal for them. I think this is the rare trade where we see something that initially looks like an overpayment and actually ends up being beneficial to all parties.
Mm-hmm.
But Ovi's contract has got to be looming. Like, obviously, Ovi's loyal. He's the type of guy that'll probably take a pay cut, but that still is fascinating to me that they need to re-sign Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of been the elephant in the room for the entire season for Caps fans, where I don't think that the unthinkable is going to happen. I don't think Alex Ovechkin plays for another team next year, but it is interesting to see how it's going to play out, of course. And I mean, like I said, a number of different ways it could go, but I mean, hell, for all we know, they win the cup this year, which is very much a possibility. And Ovi retires and says, screw the record. I don't need it. So who the hell knows at this stage? I mean,
yeah,
the man did the backstroke in a pool drunk off his ass. So, I mean, you can't exactly predict what Alex Ovechkin wants to do for his own future. I think it's very much up to him. I'll mention this as well. Not too much to say about the Islanders or the Penguins, but we'll get to the Boston Bruins, of course. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Of course, the stat before the trade was that Taylor Hall had more breakaways than any player in the NHL in the last 2 seasons and hadn't scored on any of them. So, Deej, what did he do for his first goal against the Islanders and Semyon Varlamov? He scored on a breakaway, and he has matched his Sabres goal total in just 3 games with the Bruins, who now play the Sabres for, I think, 3 consecutive games at this stage. So Taylor Hall is just going to spank his former team, and that's why I'm feeling pretty confident about the Rangers not catching them. And then aside from the fact that, again, that second line for the Bruins has just been revitalized with Hall, Krejci, and Craig Smith, who, I mean, Craig Smith, 27 points in 42 games. You know, for somebody paying $3 million to, or 3.1 to be a middle six option, I really like Craig Smith at this stage. He's been, extrememly hot in the past couple of weeks. But then there's Jeremy Swayman, who at this stage, Deej, 4-1-0, a 1.78 GAA, a 9.38 save percentage with his first career shutouts. I just, God, it's going so much better so far than I ever could have hoped. I mean, again, you're talking about a former, I think, 3rd round pick, maybe 4th, won the NCAA Goalie of the Year award, of course. It gets that very little amount of AHL time, like I said, similar to a Tuukka Rask, and is now just playing lights out for a Bruins team, behind the Bruins defense. And again, this is why I will always say, at the end of the day, the team in front of you can be bad. Like, people are taking shots at that Bruins defense, being like, Lozon, McAvoy, Riley Clifton, Tenorti, Kampfer. That sucks. Yeah, Jeremy Swayman's still doing well. So, and John Gibson doesn't have the best numbers. Yes, Anaheim defense sucks, but Stolarz just did what he did. At the end of the day, the team in front of a goaltender, it's not the end-all, be-all. Well, the defense sucks, so the goalie's excused. It's not always that. And for as much as people want to take shots at this Bruins defense, I mean, Jeremy Swayman has been just absolutely phenomenal. And I mentioned this before he made his debut. With Rask, with Halak, the Bruins have their future in goal, hopefully, with Swayman and with Vladar. I'm incredibly pumped. And, oh, God, I can't gush about Swayman enough. And I'll mention, too, Brad Marchand became the 23rd player in NHL history to notch 50 shorthanded points, which is kind of crazy. There's a massive tie with 50 points shorthanded, but I was looking at the stats, Deej, 4 shorthanded points all time. And I mean, Marchand, the top 10 is 56. He's on 50. The crazy thing to me is top 10, 56 points. You have Derek Sanderson, former Bruin, Matt Sundin, and Rod Brindamore, all on 56 shorthanded points. The top 5, though, jumps from 56 to 72. So 10 at 56, 5 is 72. And then you get into the top 3, which is Yzerman at 83. So immediately 11 more shorthanded points than Dave Poulin, who was at 5. Deej, do you care to guess the gap between 2 and 3? Because I'm sure you can tell by my voice here, it's a gap, man. And I don't know, unless you care to hazard a guess, I'll just tell you at this stage.
Were either of these guys on the 1980s Oilers?
Both of them. So it's Yzerman. Right, so
are we talking Messier, Gretzky?
Yes, we are. So it's Steve Yzerman at 3 with 83 shorthanded points. At 2, it's Mark Messier with 144. And then Gretzky number 1 at 149. It's fucking absurd how good the 80s Oilers were in every aspect. Just absurd. I had to see who was still ahead of Marchand, and obviously there's still quite a few players, but good Lord. What we have learned, Brad Marchand is an incredible, shorthanded weapon, and good God, the 80s Oilers were just something else.
Yeah.
So,
gosh, yeah.
We'll move on then. We are looking at winding down
I'm
here.
I'm still processing just like, were they ever even really shorthanded, you know? Like, that's nuts.
I don't think they were, right? Like, I don't think you can consider yourself shorthanded if Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier are on your penalty kill. Like, and essentially the crazy thing is the Oilers
just
could
more
do
room
something
for them to skate.
Right. And the Oilers could do essentially the same thing now with Draisaitl and McDavid. And I mean, we'll jump out of order. We won't go to the North Division fully yet, but the two notes I had for Edmonton is that Connor McDavid became the first player to 70 points this season in just 43 games, which Deej is a 133-point pace in an 82-game season. And then Leon Draisaitl is just a few points away from becoming Germany's all-time leading scorer in the NHL. He's on 485. Marco Sturm's on 487. So the fact that Leon Draisaitl is already going to pass someone like Marco Sturm, who had a pretty stellar NHL career. I mean, again, just the fact that you had, and I'm not saying obviously that, Draisaitl and McDavid are at that exact same class, but in concept, in theory, being able to do that, obviously the game's different, talk about the PK ability, but yeah, why wouldn't you throw Connor McDavid out there on the penalty kill to just take advantage of, perhaps a little bit more space to work with in theory. So, absolutely crazy.
That's disgusting.
It really is. Aside from that, in the East Division, I do want to mention for the New York Rangers as well. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention this. First and foremost, I do also want to take a shot and say, screw the New Jersey Devils. For the love of God, whenever they play the Bruins, they play their goddamn hearts out. But against the Rangers, they're like, we don't got to do anything. Man. Igor Shesterkin rocking at one point a 199-minute shutout streak against the Devils. So thanks for nothing, New Jersey. But on the flip side of that, Deej, we've talked about our favorite for the heart. We've obviously talked about McDavid. We've talked about Patrick Kane and even how Patrick Kane thinks it should be Connor McDavid. Rangers fans are not out of line for saying that Artemi Panarin should be in the heart conversation. Because, my God, despite missing a fourth of their games this year, he is now tied for 9th in the league in points with 50 on the season. I don't think he'll win the Hart because of the time that he's missed. But, yeah, make no mistake, Artemi Panarin is a superstar in this league. And like I said, I don't think it's the Rangers' year to make the playoffs. I think it would be more detrimental to them than anything. And I'm not saying that because, you're just a Bruins fan who wants your team to make it. I genuinely think, like I said before, if the Rangers get those extra assets from this draft, they are set. Because you'll have those extra resources to be able to wheel and deal once everyone turns the corner at the same time with Artemi Panarin leading the charge. The New York Rangers, unless a disaster happens, will win a Stanley Cup in this decade. I have no doubt in my mind. None whatsoever.
Yeah. And so here's something uncomfortable to think about. Don't even have to give an answer. Are the Bruins still in a playoff spot if Artemi Panarin doesn't take his leave of absence?
I don't know. And I think that says it all, doesn't it? I think that says it all.
I think it really does.
There's been, you could break down the minutia of it by saying like, okay, well, who did the Rangers play at the time and the team form, and the schedule and all that. But that is a legitimate question that I, with no certainty, can answer. It says a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Damn you.
I think you're dead on with the Cup prediction too. I need to second that. That's by no means a hot take. This team is built to win.
You talk about ownership and management doing the right thing at the right time. We talked about the windows so much. We've talked about it with the Sharks, with St. Louis, with Pittsburgh today. The Rangers are essentially, I don't want to say, I guess, the standard bearer in a way for having the realization, the self-reflection, and making the right move at the right time. Because that absolutely turned that organization around. There is no denying how important it was for them to pump the brakes when they did and say, let's retool a bit. And it has worked out so much better than I think they ever could have imagined at this stage. With that, in the East Division as well, of course, not much more to say about Philly or New Jersey at this stage, but I wanted to mention with Buffalo, they were officially eliminated from playoff contention, Deej. Surprise, surprise. But there were a couple of injury notes to mention. Now, Architect talked about this when he was on the show, and feel free to go back and watch that episode if you want to hear a Sabres fan bare his soul for 2 hours. But Kyle Okposo, injured again. He's going to miss the rest of the season after undergoing surgery to repair a broken cheekbone. I just feel so bad for Kyle Okposo because, again, I don't think he was ever going to be, he's not going to be the biggest name in the league. But Kyle Okposo, fully healthy in his career, continuing at the same pace, would have been at the very least in the Hall of Very Good. I think he, whether or not he stuck with the Islanders or ended up on the Sabres, I think he would have been remembered very fondly regardless and would have been known at the very least as like a cult hero. Maybe not necessarily a hockey Hall of Famer. And it's just the medical issues and the injury issues that he's had. It really is unfortunate that it's derailed his career like this.
Yeah. It really, I think about when he tore his labrum when he was playing for the Islanders. I think that was really the turning point because he was a top line scorer up until then. And then since then, his game has kind of regressed to being more of a grinder. I don't know. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. And with injuries, and with injuries as well, the big talking point for the Sabres has been Jack Eichel, of course. And Kevin Adams said this about the herniated disc issue. Hope was it would move back into place with rehab, slight improvement, but not enough to return. On Tuesday, Sabres doctors and Eichel's camp decided to shut him down in early May. They'll meet again to check the status. A friendly reminder here that Ralph Kruger stated he had no idea that Jack Eichel was hurt when he was still the head coach of this team. So for as many negative marks and indictments as you can have against this franchise, against this organization, the handling of Jack Eichel and this injury concern in the past 7 months or so, it really is one of those situations, Deej, where you think, it can't get any worse than this. And the Buffalo Sabres say, well, sit back and watch. And it's, I don't know, Sabres fans, when it's going to turn around. But on the bright side, Sam Reinhart has 16 goals this year, apparently. So shout out to Sam Reinhart.
Yeah, right. Way to go, Sam.
Good old
way to be the lone candle in this world of dark.
With that, we'll quickly move to the North Division here as we look to wrap up this show. Of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs there. I actually thought I closed the tab there for a second, Deej. That would have been a disaster. The North Division at this stage, of course, Toronto at the top. Right now, 6-2-2 in their last 10. Still the big news for the Maple Leafs, of course. Zach Hyman out for a couple of weeks after an Alex Edler 2-game suspension-worthy kneeing call. It is the same knee he had surgery on previously. That is a huge loss. Zach Hyman means a lot to that team. The good thing is, of course, they brought in some depth to hopefully be able to mitigate the damage caused by losing this particular player. And, of course, William Nylander as well, late for a meeting and might be benched for the Leafs next game. So shout out to William Nylander for picking, if there was ever a good time to be late for a team meeting, the worst possible time, as I get it. There are some Leafs fans who already have the attitude of, oh, God, here we go again, because these things are seemingly starting to add up here all at once, heading towards the playoffs. So best wishes legitimately to Zach Hyman here, hoping that everything is okay. That's a phenomenal player who I think is due for an interesting little payday here moving forward as well. And for the Leafs' sake, you better hope that he is able to heal up. And I mean, the good thing is, obviously, their playoff spot is not in jeopardy, right? Like, they're good to go here moving forward. in terms of, you have essentially 3 weeks to a month to just have him hopefully be able to rest up and be fully healthy for the playoffs.
Yeah, Hyman brings so much, especially to the playoff style of hockey that the Leafs play, where I know he's obviously not the line driver, but guys like Zach Hyman really make the world go round. Otherwise, you have these superstars that are insulated. They can't find anybody to play with. Like you think about Sidney Crosby and the constant hunt for line mates. Zach Hyman has been that guy for Austin Matthews. So, I don't know. I mean, occasionally he's not with Matthews, but I think that's to me, that's his bread and butter.
I think Leafs fans will know what you mean in terms of like, hey, Zach Hyman is, the type of player that allows greats to be great. So
yeah, exactly.
Definitely agree with you on that. For the Winnipeg Jets, an interesting stat here, Deej, because pretty much all season long, people have been waiting for the Jets to fall off, and it's never really happened. And the stat here that I saw is that the Jets have 10 players with 20-plus points and 3 players with 40. That is the same number as the Colorado Avalanche. It's technically better than what Tampa has, what Florida has, what Toronto has. So Winnipeg quietly, and we kind of saw it as well with like Adam Lowry being re-signed here. The Winnipeg Jets have, something really good here. I don't know if it's enough to necessarily make a run this season, obviously. But the Jets are a dangerous team, despite the fact, of course, that they lost Patrick Laine. But gained Dubois, of course, I guess is the right way to word it. You can't make it sound like they lost Laine for nothing.
Yeah, right. This is a team filled with line drivers, and I think that's what I like about the Jets right now. You got Blake Wheeler, line driver. You got Mark Scheifele, line driver. You got Ehlers. I would argue that he is a line driver style player with his passing and his playmaking skills. And you combine that with guys like Stasny absolutely showing up, guys like Neil Pionk absolutely showing up. And then you combine that with Andre Pavelec, who is, prior to this season, we were talking about he was a Vezina favorite. He might be one of the best goalies in the league. But this whole season, in a weird way, he's gone unheralded despite being elite. So there's just so many pieces in place for Winnipeg that they're producing on multiple lines because of their distribution of line drivers.
And good amount of credit there, I think, goes to Paul Maurice, too, with the coaching, because you got to figure there were a lot of questions about the leadership of that team, whether it be the coaching with Maurice, the leadership of Scheifele and Wheeler in the aftermath of the Laine trade. This is a team. I get that, the idea of the superstars are in Toronto, they're in Edmonton. People are even talking about Montreal, I feel like, more than Winnipeg in terms of a team that could come out of the North Division. Would I be shocked if the Winnipeg Jets made it out of the North Division? I have to say I wouldn't be. Maybe a little bit surprised, but shocked? Certainly not. How could you be with the way that they're playing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, our final point here that I wanted to mention, it is about the previously aforementioned Montreal Canadiens. And this was from Sportsnet Stats. Carey Price versus the Senators this season. 1-3-1 with a 3.17 GAA and an 880 save percentage, facing 26, nearly 27 shots against per game. But it's all the defense's fault. Remember that. All the time, always, it's the defense's fault. Damn that Jeff Petrie. Damn him to hell.
Yeah, those Sens have his number this year. That's interesting. I would love to see like some advanced statistics and analysis about like what's really going on, why Ottawa has Carey Price's number.
I still don't know if Ottawa has been shut out this season, by the way. That was the stat that kind of blew everyone's mind, including yours. They did just shut out Montreal 4-0. But I don't believe they've been shut out this season. Taking a look here. They still haven't. Yeah, so shout out to the only team in the NHL yet to be shut out. The Ottawa Senators. Keep on trucking.
Yeah, right.
So, Deej, with that, I think we're good here for this show. Again, we want to thank everybody for joining us here on this particular adventure. Of course, you can follow myself on Twitter at Tougie24, Deej at DEJ1088. Of course, you can follow me everywhere else, the YouTubes, the Twitch, everywhere. Playing a lot of MLB The Show, of course, now that is out. I want to mention this as well on Twitter, of course, the contact email. Tougie24@yahoo.com. Become affiliated with this brand. Do it. You know you want to. Deej, any parting words for this particular show before I get ready to go paint a house?
Well, obviously now we've got a business email. Feel free to become Toug adjacent.
Can that be the title of the stream over what we said, or the
Toug adjacent? Oh, 100%.
Well, I don't even remember what the hell we said.
Let me put it in the show notes.
What was the other title going to be? I don't even remember anymore.
I don't even remember. Something about my voice being shot. No, it was. We said it really early on in the episode, and we just nailed it. It was right out of the park. But I like Toug adjacent as well. I don't know. What are my parting words? I don't have many funny things to say. My voice is disappearing at a rapid rate. So hopefully it'll be back in time for our second episode this week. NHL, I need you to do some newsworthy stuff.
Yes,
Looking
please.
forward to Spencer Knight's debut. It may just be a smokescreen. We may see Dreger in net. That said, I went to another Florida Panthers game last night. And it was mask giveaway night. So the giveaway was a mask. You had to have a mask to be admitted, but they gave you a second mask while you were there. So I did like the old switcheroo, right? Where like, you need to quickly switch shirts in public where you like to like throw on the other shirt and then like, like contort yourself to remove the other shirt. Did it with masks. They gave out these masks that are essentially made with the same material as the cloth you would use to clean your glasses. And the problem with that is it's not a very breathable material. So I would just inhale and it would just like go into my mouth and through my nostrils. And it looked like I was like the 9th member of Slipknot. It was not great. It was not a good visual.
I think we have another episode title.
The 9th member of Slipknot. Fantastic.
Indeed. See you next time, everybody.
Tougie's Take is a Deej Audio production. Deej Audio, you're listening to it. Copyright 2021. See you next week.